What up, Marsh Pod? Happy day after Valentine's Day. Love is in the air because we're seeing so much love for these unsigned hype teams that are announced. Games tomorrow night, of course. According to this Wednesday, as I said. Change your plans because the goal that I had originally for Thursday is not going to happen. So that's the power of the jinx of the teas. So we're still going to get some new stuff coming in, but obviously it's not going to be for this episode. Did want to, because the news dropped 2 nights ago, rather, I guess, right after we were recording, that Kahlil Erickson was being released, rather, or was being unsigned, I guess, from Yacht Club because of recruiting violations. And I think Jay Laster, who came out after the fact and, was frustrated by the fact that he lost a player who was seemingly going to play a pretty decent sized role on that group. He'd shown an ability to kind of turn his perception around. Today, it seems as if some of the comments that I saw him make maybe are going in the opposite direction of that. But I think that really this is the right decision by the league. And in some instances, while I don't love the idea that they're essentially forcing a decommitment from Kahlil Erickson, I don't know that Jay Laster has a lot of ground to stand on, because when he says, look, this wasn't, and in due respect to Coach Laster, he has not sounded the alarm that this is unfair, that he should get him back, any of that. And of course, he's got an opportunity now with unsigned type tournament to add in his 10th man with an open roster spot, making him, I think it's 2 now teams, unless other things have changed. But it's still, rules still exist because rules still exist. And the fact that Coach Laster wasn't the head coach at the time that the improprieties took place between Yacht Club and Kahlil Erickson, that's not necessarily, the fact that he wasn't the head coach doesn't absolve the organization as a whole of the wrongdoing. And it, just like we see what we previously used to see, and not quite as much anymore, and I don't think that we will. It'll take a unique situation, but college football, we used to see this every couple of years. A team would be deemed ineligible for postseason play. I think Ohio State was a big one. Baylor, obviously, for much different reasons, but those players, Penn State faced a similar issue. Those players, those coaches that are still there in the aftermath, just because they weren't there for the initial, as we said, the initial issue, the initial impropriety, does not mean that the situation didn't happen and that the wrongdoing didn't occur. And punishment still needs to be doled out. So in this case, as we've seen SimWorld Hoops as a league take steps to unsign players, to remove players, I think this is a continuation of a consistent approach that the league has had when approaching wrongdoing, when addressing wrongdoing. Something outside of the rules of the league happened, and the league needed to take recourse, regardless of the fact that Jay Laster didn't have anything to do with it, regardless of the fact that Kahlil Erickson had started to maybe turn his career, maybe his projections around. That stuff doesn't matter, because the issue was the rules were still broken at one moment in time. If the league, if SimWorld Hoops were to take the more lenient approach, saying, well, it wasn't him, it wasn't Jay Laster, so we shouldn't punish this version of the organization for the wrongdoings of the previous version, you start walking the slope that the NFL has had, where they don't have a consistent outlined, this is how you get suspended, this is how long you get suspended. There's none of that. Deshaun Watson was suspended for fewer games for sexual misconduct against 20-plus women, while Calvin Ridley was suspended for a year, who applied for reinstatement today, for betting $1,000 on a game. Which is worse? There's no question which is worse. Yet the outcome is so drastically different because of the obvious fact that Deshaun Watson is a quarterback that has much higher, and I don't care what the league says, you couldn't convince me otherwise, that has higher opportunity to increase eyeballs on the game of football than Calvin Ridley. That's the negative. And every time somebody gets suspended from now on, it's going to be compared to the suspension of Deshaun Watson. SimWorld Hoops is taking the opposite approach, saying these are the rules. If this happens, this is the outcome. It's cut and dry. There's no wiggle room. There's no black and white. There's no appeal process that says maybe it should be otherwise. It's much like the MLB. This is how many games you get suspended for the first time you test positive for performance-enhancing drugs. That's it. You know the punishment. You know what happens if you are caught by it. So I think while a disappointing outcome for both Jay Laster, Yacht Club, and Kahlil Erickson, it's the right outcome, and it's the one the league had to make, and the league smartly made. It's just somebody has to pay the crimes, or pay the price of the crimes committed before them. It's as simple as that. All right, y'all have a great weekend.